Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reserve Team Podcast, your home of everything Australian and New Zealand football. My name is Branson Gibson, and I am your host once again this week for this episode of the Reserve Team Podcast. We have a special episode coming up this week. We will be previewing the upcoming 2021 NPLW New South Wales season. With me today to break down the teams and provide some insight into the competition and the season to come, we have NPLW New South Wales commentator Will Constant. Hello, mate. I can't even say hello right. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. How are you? It's great to be back on the podcast.
Thanks for joining me. I almost butchered that introduction there. Apparently, hello was the hardest thing to say. But, mate, we've got an exciting episode coming up today. The NPL New South Wales is starting back up. We had a couple of games last weekend. We've got a full fixture ahead this week. And so what we're going to do, mate, is you being a commentator for the NPLW New South Wales, we're going to have a bit of a preview and look at the season to come.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, it's a very, very exciting season. And by the end of this preview, I think a lot of viewers and a lot of listeners are going to see why a lot of commentators and a lot of women's football writers are tipping this season to be one of the best seasons that we've seen in a very long time.
So I've read a couple of things that said that. So give me a quick spiel. Why do you think overall this is going to be one of the best seasons ever? I mean, that just sort of sounds a little bit like a throwaway line, but you really believe
Yeah.
it.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of hard to do now that when we're not looking at the teams, but a lot of the teams have made really, really good off-season moves, and there has been a lot of movement across teams as well. A lot of teams have gotten better, and I think the overall standard is going to lift quite a lot as well. Not to say that it hasn't lifted already. It's already at a very, very good level. A lot of W League players, a lot of ex-Matildas, even young Matildas. There's even a few current Matildas in there as well who are kind of in that mix trying to play more football. So you have all types of players. You've got, young players, you've got veterans, you've got, current stars. Just today I was looking, there was, a few players who will be playing in the MPLW who are in actually the W League team of the season. So a
Wow.
lot of really high quality players. And not just high quality players, but the competition level I think is going to be very, very good as well. It's not going to be a season that I think will be dominated by one or two teams. I think it is going to be a very, very competitive season, especially now that it goes to that 20-plus game season that we're more used to seeing rather than just the 11 that we saw last year. So, yeah, expect a lot of teams to impress over the course of the season.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. So to break everything down, we're going to keep it nice and simple. We're going to run through the teams alphabetically. So the first team we're going to take a look at is Rpr Leichhardt. Now, last season they finished 8th, but that position alone is a little bit misleading because whilst they were 8th, they were only 1 point off the top 4. What did you make of Rpr's season last year, mate? And what are you expecting from them going into this campaign?
I think speaking first on their season last year, I think they would have been really, really disappointed not to have made the top 4, even though they were really, really close to making it. I think the squad that they assembled last year was very, very strong, and that has prompted the fact that they didn't make it last year has prompted some really, really good moves in the off season. So just to talk about the types of players that you can expect to see who are back from last year first, you've got someone like Princess Sabini who, I mean, needs no introduction. She's a very, very strong player who, had 4 goals last season, but they're going to expect even more from her. She's looked very, very good for Sydney FC. So RB will be very, very encouraged by what they see from her. Of course, you've still got Georgia Yermandale, who's back as well. She's been playing with the Wanderers over the past season. She's back in the W League. You've got Tegan Allen, who unfortunately is injured, so that's going to be a bit of a tough one there. You've also got Rihanna Polachina, who's just quietly had a very, very good season over in Newcastle. A nice, strong midfielder who's been at the team for a while, and amongst all these new signings, could provide like that kind of stability that they need to, in terms of like chemistry and things like that. And this kind of applies for all teams, but the problem a lot of teams have, and the teams are currently having because it's the start of the season, is that W League players aren't back in training just yet, or they're just coming back now, so they haven't had a full preseason. So the more returning players your team has, the better, and that's going to be a consistent theme. It just doesn't just apply to Arpia, it applies to all teams. In that the preseason is a bit murky because you've got players playing W League. Also, you've got Deborah Ann Della Harp who's coming back. She was at Perth. She was there with them last year. I thought she had a pretty good season as well. To talk about some players that you can expect to see joining them. You've got Susan von Sonkum, who has been sitting away with a long-term injury for a little while. She's been at the Wanderers for the last couple of years, but even though she's been injured, back when she was fully fit in 2019, she won the Golden Boot, 20 goals in 23 games. So someone like Susan von Sonkum, you add her to Princess Abini, and all of a sudden the team starts to look very, very dangerous. You also got Gemma Simon, who, again, veteran, very well experienced, because co-captain of the Jets. The team is just adding up at this point, but the thing is, I'm not done. You've got Nikki Flannery and Grace Marr, that duo that we saw, there was a feature on them, I think, run by the W League. They've been playing together since like kids or something like that. And you put those two in midfield alongside Rihanna Polachina, and that is not just a NPLW high-level midfield. That is arguably a W League high-level midfield as well. So then you throw in Tori Toomuth at the back, who's a junior Matildas captain, and they've basically improved everywhere across the pitch, except for goalkeeper, where they've retained Magus, who is the third choice keeper at the Wanderers, and it's going to be interesting to see how she goes, because she hasn't played for the Wanderers, but she's of course been part of that squad. And I mean, the goalkeeping coach for the Wanderers women's team is Kovic, so you can expect to see how her development will be impacted by one of the big names in A-League goalkeeping. Of course, that very memorable save in the Champions League is, I think, a lot of Wanderers fans will remember that one. So yeah, in terms of Rpr, I see a really, really well balanced squad across the park. The big question mark will be, can they put all these individual pieces together? Can they get this group of stars to work together? Because the problem was they had a very strong team last year, but it just didn't really click. And that's ultimately going to be the challenge for their new coach this year, Spencer Pryor, who is one of the most experienced coaches that they could have probably gotten. He's a former Matildas assistant. He's coached the Thai women's national team. He strikes me as the type of coach that won't accept anything less than success this season. And given the way that Rpr have gone about their transfers this season, I think anything less than a grand final appearance for this team would be considered a huge disappointment, because you look at the squad and it's very hard to see anything else, to be honest.
Well, definitely. I mean, that squad is loaded. That's the kind of squad where you would almost say would be competitive in the W League. Like, if you picked them up straight away and put them straight in the W League, we've seen teams like Perth and the Newcastle just sort of struggle a little bit. So you really think it's grand final or bust for them?
I honestly do, because they, 1 point off top four last season. So you could argue that had the season been a bit longer, they might have been able to turn it around. They've gone and added a really strong coach. They've added attackers, they've added midfielders, they've added defenders. I mean, it's just really hard, because you have a squad that was top four caliber last season, and they've gone and gotten way better. Yeah. So it is scary, and unfortunately, they won't be playing this weekend. Their game has been postponed due to some of the things that, because with the W League, they can have the option to postpone, so we won't get to see them in action, unfortunately, this weekend. But I think come next weekend, a lot. I think the ball is definitely in Rpr's court to see how they go, and they'll be wanting to make statements across this season, because everyone will be wanting to beat this team.
Yeah, well, definitely. It's going to be interesting to see how how the season plays out for them. Lofty ambitions. We're going to move on to another team who might have more humble goals for the upcoming season. Bankstown City. Last season, they finished 12th. Not a single point all season. 11 games played, 11 losses. Their defence, as you can imagine, when you lose every game you play, was not too flush. They conceded 60 goals in those 11 games. Well, what can we expect from Bankstown City? Are they going to have any upside this season, do you think?
We look at some of the moves they've made in the off-season. They've also gotten better, to the point where I think that I would be very surprised to see them back in 12th. I think this they could definitely move up a few places and take some points off those mid-table teams and really surprise a few teams, because they have a lot of experience. You've got players like, someone like Carla Trimboli, who's a very established player at this level, who's a former uni player. And when we get to that team, we'll talk about the past success of that Sydney uni team. You've got Liana Danaskos, who's also ex-uni, ex-Wanderers. You've got someone like Olivia Price, who's just played with the Wanderers. So they have a lot of smart and good moves that they've made in the off-season to make this team better. They've also brought in a bunch of former Rpr players as well, the likes of Alyssa Jansen and Jess Fowler, and Logan Gerard as well. Those, and we'll talk about that in relation to who their coach is as well, because their coach is ex-Rpr coach Matt Costantini.
And he got the sack. He got the sack last year when he was at Rpr, right?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if sack is the right term. It was a mutual termination, I think, is what we've been given. But I mean, that's not to say that he isn't a good coach, because he's the coach that ultimately brought them from NPL2 to NPL1. And so he's had a big role in bringing Rpr up. He is a full-time analyst for Sydney FC, and when you look at the way Bankstown play, it's no surprise, because they do play that 4-2-2-2 formation, which Steve Corica's side, of course, use. And that formation was on display in their game, which they played against Manly last weekend, which, whilst they did lose, to me showed that there was significant improvement from last season. Understandably, a 3-1 loss doesn't look that flattering, but within that game itself were some real highlights. I thought, in particular, the goal that was scored by Georgia Plessas was absolutely sublime. I'm not sure if it won goal of the week, but it was definitely up there, even including the men's competitions too. It was a real quality strike. So there could be some real highlights in this team. Expect them to surprise a couple. I think any teams would be unwise to simply think that Bankstown are going to be the easy beats this season. There are some really good players in this team. Some good young players too. You've got someone like Mostagimi, who I thought looked really good in their round one game. The commentator at the time for that game, Chris Carulia, who's been on this, who did the preview, he's an expert when it comes to all things Manly. And when he was commentating that game, he said he'd spoken to Matt Costantini and said that Mostagimi was a player that Matt Costantini thinks will impress this season, a good young central defender. So there are some real nice things about this team that could potentially upset some of those bigger sides and really pick up some serious points this season.
Well, definitely. And that 3-1 defeat that you mentioned against Manly, of course, won the grand final last year. So
yeah,
that's, while, as you said, an unfortunate result, positives to take away. And I'm hoping that they do better this season, but it does sound like there are some positives to take away for Bankstown. Moving on to the next team, the Blacktown Spartans. So last season they finished 5th on the table. They missed out on the finals on goal difference, just outside the finals positions there. The defence was pretty darn good. They conceded 11 goals across their 11 games. That was tied for 3rd best overall. What do you see ahead for Blacktown Spartans, and are they going to be able to make that next step and crack the top 4?
I honestly think they can, and whilst they haven't made the big moves that a team like Rpr has, they have a squad that, of course, you miss out on goal difference last season. Like that's absolutely crushing in an 11-game season. And you look at the players they have; they've got most of their players are back. They've made some smart additions, so I think those factors will help. I think to propel them into the top 4, if not at least that kind of 5th or 6th finish. You look at someone like Kyra Cooney-Cross, who's back for them, and has had a whirlwind season in the W League. She's only 20 years old. She's 4th in the W League in assists, 6th in goals, has created the most chances, and is 1st in crosses, which is kind of fitting given her last name. But I think it can be someone like Kyra Cooney-Cross is not just a star for NPL at the NPL level, is a star at W League level. So expect to see her have an amazing season. She was good last season for them as well, and she's only gotten better, which is going to be very, very exciting. They've also brought back Rosie Galea, who's had a bit of a breakout season with the Wanderers, scoring a brace to start her goal scoring account for the Wanderers, which is again another very exciting player to watch. They've also got Ashley Crofts who's back. She's over at Canberra United. You've got Charlotte Grant, who's an integral part of that Adelaide side. She's started 10 out of 11 for them, and she's got some Matildas caps as well. So they've got a lot of their players still together, and they're coached by Brad Attard, who I think coached that team very, very well last season. I mean, they're going to lose Alex Roberts, who's going to retire. which will be a huge loss for them. She's been part of that squad for a very, very long time. But compared to the other sides, they've made small but I think effective moves. To talk about two players that they've brought in Courtney Nevin from Wanderers, who is a good young defender with plenty of upside, and they've brought in Letitia McKenna from Brisbane. So those, again, kind of similar in that they've made small moves, which are smart moves, not necessarily these big moves. But I think given that they had that squad together last season, they've got the same coach. Their key players have gotten better from last season. They've added two players who are going to make them really, really good. I think they should make the top four, but I don't think it'll be easy for them. They have a great squad last year, and it is going to be, you should expect to see them in that top four conversation.
Well, those two additions in Nevin and McKenna, whenever you can just sort of slot into W League quality players, that's definitely going to help. What about the loss of Alex Roberts, though? Are they going to be able to cover for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard one because when you lose someone like that who is so fundamental to your team, especially like when they retire as well, it has a bit of a different vibe to it. Um, it can be hard, but I think having the same squad as last year will help in that because they've only gone and added a couple players. They haven't completely shifted the squad. They've still got the same coach. So I think, Brad Attard will be hoping that it's mostly business as usual for them. He won't deny, and most people won't deny that Alex Roberts is a big loss. But you look at the players they've brought in, it's not really an argument of whether they replace her, but it's more of an argument, well, can they now move forward without her?
So where do you see him finishing? Are they going to make the top four? Are you willing to make
Yeah,
a big
you know what?
claim
It's a
and
tough
say
one. It's a tough one to call. I'm going to say that this team. I think this team does make the top four. I think Tyra Cooney Cross is going to take this team there. There's other great players there as well, but from what I've seen from Kyra Cooney Cross in the W League this season for the victory, it's impressed me so much. And I think if she shows a similar vein of form in the NPL, then I think this team gets there. Same with Rosie Galea. If she continues her improvement level, I think this team could get there.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to the next team. Now, this is a bit of an interesting case. Football New South Wales Institute. So last season they came sixth. They were one of three teams that finished the season on 17 points, 1 point off the finals. So they were right in that middle of the pack logjam trying to crack into that top four. They scored a bunch of goals last year. They scored 32 goals, which was the second most in the league. What can we expect from Institute? Because obviously being a bit of a development squad, it's sort of a little bit tough to get a read on them. What are you expecting from them this season?
Yeah, well, so for our viewers who aren't as well acquainted with the NPL women in New South Wales, the Institute program is basically a program run by Football New South Wales where they take the top youngsters, usually between the ages of like 16 and 18, and they put them into this team that plays at a first grade level against what are usually much older players. So it's kind of like they kind of trial the best players and they become part of the squad. They go through the program. It's kind of hard in terms of what to expect. It's a little hard to know what to expect from Institute, but I think it seems like they are going to have some key players coming back, which is pretty rare. It's more often the case is that a lot of players tend to move on year because they have the program, and so there's always the next age group constantly coming through. But to talk about, we'll get to the players that they've lost first. Someone like Aidan Keane, who was their top scorer last season. She's going off to Tigers. You've got Isabella Gomez as well, who both her and Aidan Keane were part of the Wanderers squad. Unfortunately, they didn't get that much playing time, but being part of the W League environment would benefit those girls, I think. You've got someone like Volkanovski as well, who's off to Koalas. Jamie Millard's off to Koalas. Holly Williams is over at MacArthur, and I thought she played quite well in round one. So they've lost still a lot of players. But in terms of key returning players, you've got someone, and it's a bit hard to know because it isn't, these players aren't listed on their website, but they haven't been listed in any other squad. So the assumption is that they will just return to the Institute. Someone like Sarah Hunter was at the Institute last year, and who I, or at least believe to be, will be back there. She, of course, had that Generation Now feature on the W League social media platforms, and she's had an amazing season with the Wanderers, scoring memorably those 2 goals against Adelaide. So, someone like that, she's a very, very strong player. You got someone like Darcy Malone, who, while she didn't get the same kind of W League exposure, she's got junior Matilda caps in her own right. You've got someone like Jamila Rankin, who made the W League, I think, the team of the season that they announced, I think, earlier today. She was in there. She's been killing it for Brisbane. She's top 10 in both passes and crossing, and she has a Footballer of the Year nomination. So, they've got some good players there as well. And, Briley Henry as well, who had a really good season last year for them as well, 7 goals in 10. She scored 2 goals as well for the Wanderers, and she's got junior Matildas cap. So a lot of junior Matildas in the squad, a lot of good players still, even though they've moved a lot of players on. They were just out of reach of finishing in the top 4 last season. Do I think they'll make the top 4? I honestly don't think so, but I think they will be close to that 5th or 6th kind of position where they will be contending. The fact that they have some players returning, then again, that hasn't been confirmed still, so it's a bit hard to know. That will help them. But yeah, it's Institute's a bit of an unknown one in terms of the players they have. But in terms of the kind of football they played, it is very it's that 4-3-3 national curriculum type of football that you can come to expect from them, and it's very entertaining to watch. I mean, they had the second most goals last season.
Yeah.
They scored a truckload of goals, and which I kind of you could maybe say that reflects the youthful energy of this team and constantly getting forward. And there are some really strong players who will be back for them this year, so expect them to perform well.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of goals conceded, we know that they were obviously very high scoring. They conceded 17, which is sort of middle of the table or middle of the road in terms of goals conceded compared to the rest of the league. So it's not like they're... I remember, I'm a Melbourne City fan, so when we had Aaron Moy, Harry Neville, Bruno Fornaroli, we'd win every game 4-3. So it does seem like Institute are a little bit more balanced and a little bit more well-rounded than that. But moving on go ahead.
I was going to say, I forgot to touch on one of the key... Well, you started mentioning defence, and I forgot to talk about Jessica Nash, who's a 16-year-old centre-back who's started started every game for Canberra. And let's not forget, Canberra's a top 4 side in the W League. So for a 16-year-old to come into a top 4 side, to start every game as a centre-back, I mean, that speaks volumes about where she is at the moment. I rate her quite highly, and I'd honestly expect her to go very, very far in terms of her development. She's a player that is very, very solid at the back, and if she's back at Institute, expect them to, defend, like you mentioned, at a reasonable level.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. Another team who is quite fascinating in that in a similar development squad kind of sense is a team, one of my favourite names, the Emerging Jets. Similar to Institute, where they're mostly a youth team, so it can be a bit hard to get a read on who's coming in and who's going out. If we have a look at how they went last season, they finished 11th. They had just the 1 win and 10 losses. Institute might love scoring goals, but the Emerging Jets did not. They only scored 5 goals all season. Not a single scorer netted more than 1 goal either for the Jets. What can we expect from them, and what sort of challenges do they face? Because similar to Institute, player retention is obviously a difficult one, but it seems to be more of an issue for the Jets for some reason.
Yeah, well, the Jets, like you said, that player retention can be quite difficult. I think, if you look at the squad they had last season, they lost Renee Poutney, who, after round 2, and she goes off to the US to, have a Division 1 college scholarship. Same with Kiani Latham, they lost after round 1, who goes to UT Martin on a Division 1 scholarship. So it shows that the program is producing players, and it's just hard because they then can't keep those players in their squad. But I think, you look at who coaches them. They've got Ash Wilson, who doubles as their W League coach, which I think is really, really cool because you get that nice feeling of progression, that continuity, and that kind of unity of voice within the team, that you have the W League coach also coaching, the youth system as well. In terms of players that are going to be returning for them, Tessa Tamplin was there last year for them. She's part of the Jet squad, but she isn't listed on the website, but isn't listed to go anywhere else either. So the natural assumption is that she'll just be back there. She's got Matilda's caps at a youth level. She's part of their W League team. She's quite a strong player, I think, as well. You've got Josie Morley in there as well, who's got junior Matilda's caps. And more recently as well, Willandau, Thornton and Karapidis were all selected for the junior Matilda's camp. So it shows that the program is actually producing players who are going to play, at a high level. Unfortunately, player retention is a big issue for them, and that ultimately affects their ability to, win points over a season. If you have to keep losing players to either, overseas opportunities, to other NPL clubs. A good example of that is Sarah Moore, who's gone from, she was in their first grade side last year. It looks like she'll be playing in the reserve grade side for Rpr, which, isn't surprising. We just talked about Rpr and how stacked that particular squad is. You've got Hannah Jones, who's gone across to Sydney Uni. It is a bit difficult to kind of to keep their players. So I think the goal for Ash Wilson and her side this year will be development, continue to develop these players, continue to give them opportunities to play at a high level, and to continue, this youth development program that they've got going, and which is, seems to be working at a decent level so far.
Sort of extrapolating a little bit, so obviously they're linked to the Newcastle Jets. So is it a bit of a concern? Like, player retention's a big thing, but they seem to lose a lot of players to fellow NPLW teams. Is it, a difficult one where those players aren't then sort of staying with Newcastle or aren't sort of graduating into the senior W League team at the Jets at all, do you think?
I mean, I think it's different. It depends on how you look at it. Because if you look at it from like a very holistic and broad approach, you would say that it's not a problem because they're producing players who are playing at a good level, and it shouldn't really matter like where they play, as long as they're producing good players who are going to play in the junior Matildas and potentially even the Matildas themselves, because that is what maybe FFA might say about a program like this. On the flip side, if you're the Jets, well then you're investing what little money you have at the moment into this youth program, and unfortunately, it's not really translating to your first side. So, it would be a bit of an issue. But I think that's ultimately down to like how the club wants to, whether like how hard they want to push to retain these players. And I think having Ash Wilson as the coach for both is a really strong step in that direction, because you have, the coach you have in the winter season is then the coach you have in the summer W League season. So something like that is definitely a step in the right direction. But I think, Newcastle, if they are worried about it, then it is a hard thing to battle.
Yeah, and I mean, worst case scenario, they still have a great name, Emerging Jets. I think that's a fantastic name for a football team. Moving on to another team that has a fantastic name, the Illawarra Stingrays. What can we expect from them? So last season they finished 9th, which was disappointing because it was, I think it was the first time they'd missed out on a top 5 finish since 2014. They also have lost a number of influential players. So what can we expect from Illawarra this season, mate?
I think the Stingrays they're a very interesting one. I don't think they'll be in that top 4 conversation or top 5, which I think will be kind of disappointing because last season was the first time that they weren't in the top 5 since 2014. So obviously they're a club that wants to get back to, that top 5 position sooner rather than later. But I think in terms of, you look at their outs, you look at their ins, you look at the players they currently have. Yes, it's a good squad. Will they finish 9th? I would be surprised if they do, because I think that squad maybe kind of undersold themselves a little bit last season. You look at who's coming back for them. You've got Margot Chavez, who's had a bit of a breakout season with the Wanderers. If you look at all the signings that the Wanderers made, there was a lot of young players that came through. And I think she was probably the first to adapt. She adapted quite quickly to the W League, and her story behind her is quite interesting. And if our viewers are interested, there's a lot of articles have been published about like her family background and stuff like that. And she's moved around from country to country. It's actually quite interesting. I definitely recommend taking a look at it if you have a bit more time. So someone like Margot Chavez is going to be very, very integral, especially, being that rocket centre back. They've got Erica Holloway, who's, back in this, who's back in the W League. You've got Chloe Middleton, who was at the Wanderers. You've got Caitlin Cooper, who was at the Wanderers. You've got Danica Matos, who was at the Wanderers. So if you look at, you've got Margot Chavez, who was in the Wanderers backline, Caitlin Cooper, Wanderers backline, Danica Matos, Wanderers backline. So you've got almost the Wanderers defence, basically. So they've had that experience of playing in the W League. The Wanderers team as a whole, there were definitely some highlights. Whilst they didn't make the top four, there's still some good points about that team. So they'll be looking to use that experience to try and improve. In terms of outs, they've lost a couple players, all of which have been influential for them. Sarah Johnston's relocated to Canberra. Kayla Austin's has injury. Kendis has relocated to Queensland. You've got Olivia Price, who we spoke about previously, who's now over in Bankstown. So I think, expect some highlights from them. I think they'll probably hover around that mid-table kind of category in terms of sides, but they have a lot of players who, are definitely ones to watch over the course of the season.
So you don't think they're going to crack the top four again, though?
Unfortunately, not. I don't see it happening.
No worries. Well, that brings us pretty much to halfway in our review. Our preview for the upcoming season. We're going to take a very, very quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to jump into the Hall of Fame, mate.
Awesome.
Alrighty, so taking a look at the Hall of Fame results from last week's episode, we had two nominations. It was Sean and I doing the show. His nomination was the Les Murray Australia Cup, so like a Les Murray Cup to be the name for the FFA Cup, the actual name for the trophy. And the other nomination was the Mexican visa sign guy. So Ulysses Davia at the Wanderers game. There was a photo of him with the Mexican fans in the crowd, and in the background there's one of the fans is holding a sign that's saying, please approve my wife's visa. So we can report that the Mexican visa sign guy has been inducted into the Hall of Fame. He got 63.6% of the votes. I mean, what a guy shooting his shot, of all the things to hold up. The thing that I want to know, Will, and I want to get your opinion on this, do you reckon he brought that sign specifically? Like, he's like, yeah, I'm going to the football, I need to bring this sign, or do you reckon he just wrote it on the spot?
Well, I think I've been following I don't want to butcher the pronunciation of the name, but the Mexican supporters group that has travelled to the Wellington games. I've followed them on Twitter, and they're very, very fun to follow because they kind of post updates about like various people that are part of the group.
Nice.
And I think he brings that sign. It's not just a Wanderers thing. I think there's pictures of him with the sign elsewhere. So
wow.
He's definitely campaigning hard. And, full respect to him. He's definitely earned the respect. I mean, it went viral as well. I saw it on various, like, global football Twitter pages and things like that. So he's definitely run a very, very effective campaign.
Well, absolutely. And, I mean, the campaign is so effective. It's launched him to the highs of being in the reserve team Hall of Fame. So congratulations, mate. We don't know his name. But Mexican visa sign guy, he has been inducted into the reserve team Hall of Fame. We're going to stick with the Hall of Fame now, mate. We're going to go ahead and nominate our contenders for this week's for this week's edition of the Hall of Fame as well. I'll get us started. My nomination is, I think this is a big one, mate. I think it's Riley Dobson. We saw in the last round of the W League, she announced her retirement. Her partner, I believe, has brain cancer, so she announced that she was retiring earlier than she'd originally planned to spend more time with him. Then in the final game of the season, Melbourne City, it's been a difficult campaign, missed the finals, undefeated last year. It did not go well, but she was able to not only score in the game the goal that ended up being the deciding goal as well. But then afterwards, her partner did propose to her on the pitch as well. She said yes. Fantastic scenes. The commentary was great. Teo Palazzeri was on the mic. And it turns out he's not just a football commentator, he's now I suppose a wedding announcer almost, you could say.
Yeah.
But it was a great moment to see. It was emotional. It was just one of those moments where you go, how good is sport, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, as someone who commentates football, I can't even imagine to begin wondering what I would do if I was to be put in that situation where there's a surprise proposal at a game. So full credit to Teo for getting it done in such a professional and calmly manner. But look, it's going to be hard to top that. That's one of the moments of not just, I guess, this W League season, but of all W League seasons. Another moment, much like our Mexican visa sign guy, that went viral that within a couple of hours. I saw it being reposted on everywhere. So that, to be honest, I can't really think of anything that would top that. And I think even if I was to think of something, it wouldn't even amass maybe 10 to 20% of the vote. So I might have to, and I think Sean is going to be a bit disappointed that I didn't put up much more of a fight here, but I might have to concede this Hall of Fame. Well, I think concede's the wrong word, but
yeah, I think we might just have to agree that it's unanimous.
Yeah,
mate. I mean, it's hard to pick another moment.
Would this be the first unanimous Hall of Fame inductee in the history of the podcast?
I believe it would. In the 20 or so episodes that we've done so far, I don't think there has been a unanimous one. But I think if we were to pick a moment, this is it, because it's just such a fantastic story on so many levels. And Melbourne City, who are used to ending their season with silverware, turns out this year they ended it with a different kind of silverware in the form of a wedding ring, and just a fantastic footballing story. One of those moments that'll be remembered forever. It'll go down in W League history. And
for sure,
mate, I think we're agreeing. Sean's not here, so we're going to make the call that is our unanimous, our joint unanimous reserve team Hall of Fame moment for this week. But mate, we are going to jump back into our NPLW New South Wales preview. The next team that we've got up on the list is the MacArthur Rams. So last season they finished 10th. Where do you see the Rams going this season?
Well, up until last weekend, I wasn't really coming to expect too much from the Rams this season, but they obviously went out and beat the Koalas, a team we're yet to talk about, and we'll talk about them a bit later, but they went out and beat them away from home, and that was a bit of a big statement win. A lot of players really, really impressed me from that game. You have the new signings, Beth Gordon, who I thought played very, very well. Holly Williams, who's an ex-Institute player, I thought played really well as well. They've got Mel Caceres, who was part of that uni team and that run of success there. So you've got that experience. And then you go and add Lauren Kerr and Hayla Taylor-Young from Canberra. So again, like, this kind of harps back to what I was saying, within the first minutes of the podcast about how every team feels like they've gotten better this season by the moves they've made. Even a team like the Rams, who I wasn't expecting that much. When I look back on it now, you look at the kinds of moves they've made. They've made very, very good moves. And again, they're a team that could surprise a lot of players this season. They've got, a lot of key returning players coming back. You've got Lena Camus, you've got Sean Camus, Chara Lumbus, who's at Perth, who looked really, really good in round one, and she looks to be in top form. Kylie Ledbrook, of course, who's an ex-Matilda, ex-Sydney FC. So in terms of what this team is, unfortunately, the squad is on that older side. Players like Camus aren't getting any younger, and with the season going back to 22 games, I think it's going to really push the endurance of some of the older players. But I mean, I don't think that will be a problem given the work rate of someone like Lena Camus, who we saw with the Wanderers was kind of that leadership figure amongst all those young players, and she'll continue to play a similar role within MacArthur. I mean, they're a historically really, really strong team, and finishing 10th would have really, really shocked them because of how good they're used to being. And that has prompted some changes. You bring in someone like Stephen Peters, who I think will steady the ship, and I think them finishing 10th again this season would be a huge disappointment. So expect to see them again in that kind of mid-table. And if if they go on, a nice little run of form, they could find themselves potentially sneaking their way into top four as, if they win a bunch of games in a row.
Yeah, and you mentioned Stephen Peters obviously taking over the helm as manager. He said to Football New South Wales in their official preview that his goal is that they just want to improve on last season's 10th placed finish. They have had some big additions to their roster as well, though. I'm not sure if we've touched on that just yet. W League players Lauren Keir, Hayley Taylor-Young, and then Mel Caceres as well, who's come across from Sydney Uni.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, I think that will go a long way towards Stephen Peters' goal of taking that team to something that isn't a 10th place finish. I think looking at this squad, to think that this team would finish 10th is beyond comprehension for me. I think this team definitely has that mid-table, potentially higher competitiveness about it and the reason I say potentially higher is because of the experience that they have, which could serve them well against other teams which have made a lot of new additions. And given that they're used to being at a top level, they have that mentality, which could go a long way into taking some points off some of the bigger teams, and either pushing them higher up that table.
How high do you think they'll go?
How high do I think this team goes? It's kind of a hard one. I don't see this team in that top four finals kind of position. I think this team could go in that kind of as high as maybe that 5th, 6th contention, or they could go as low as what they did last season if it all becomes a catastrophe and they finish around 9th, 10th. I think like 7th, 8th is where I think you can expect this team to finish.
Moving on to our next team, we are taking a look at the reigning champions in Manly United. They, of course, were the champions last season. 2021, though, could be a bit of an interesting campaign with Chris Williams stepping away after last year's successful campaign. What can we expect from Manly? Are they going to be champions again? Are they going to go back-to-back and repeat?
Well, I mean, they'll certainly be hoping so. I think what Manly have done is they've kept a lot of their players, and that's proven to be one of their strengths over the last few years. And it's what got them over the line, I think, in watching their grand final where they beat Sydney Uni, where they came into that as underdogs. Having that team, that core that has played together for a long time, having the coach that has coached them for a long time, definitely helped them. And, we talk about Tom Hopley. It's not like he's come from nowhere. He's come from coaching their reserves team. So they'll be hoping for that continuation and a very, very smooth transition, which honestly I think they'll get. We spoke about how they played against Bankstown a little bit earlier. 3-1, I mean, in that game, maybe on paper that doesn't look like as strong as a result that they would have been hoping for, but in that game, they were without most of their W League players. Most teams in the first round elected not to play because of W League absences. And Manly decided, you know what? We back ourselves. We've got good reserve players. We've got good first grade players still here as well. We're going to play this game. And, big win, 3-1. Yes, it's Bankstown, a team that, I personally don't think will be in that top four conversation. So what the weighting of that, you can kind of decide for yourself. But still, it just highlights that this team is ready to compete. We talk about the players they're bringing back. They've got Copus Brown, who played for the Wanderers, looked very, very strong round one, dominated the pitch from what I saw. Remy Simpson needs no introduction. She is Remy Simpson, 7 goals in 13. You look at Tara Andrews, she's 6th in the W League in goals. Sorry, that 7 in 13 was last season for Remy Simpson. Tara Andrews is over the Jets, who's the 6th leading W League scorer with 5 in 11. Then you add Ali Green, who's playing very well over at Sydney. You've got Sonny Franco at the Jets. Emily Manette, who's back. She played in the New South Wales rep side, who went up to Queensland. So, that core is still together. And that, to me, is what I think will make them a very strong side this season. That continuation, having that team will help them a lot. And I think top four, expect this team in the top four, I think, personally. They're going to have Natasha Pryor, who's back in. She'll be coming in for them. She was one of those weird, emergency signings that Sydney FC made. And she's recently come back from a long-term concussion, so it's good to see her back on the pitch. And she's a real quality player. You've got Nanatovic, who's come back from a long-term injury. She scored in her return back from injury, so it looks like she's playing with confidence. So yeah, to be honest, I think this team is going to be top four. Unfortunately, they lost Claudia Chilocan to Olympic. Brendan Chilocan's also over at Olympic now as well. So, that is going to be a loss for them. But I still think this team makes top four. The core is too strong. And having Tom Hopley is that nice, smooth progression. And I think it will work.
Well, you mentioned top four a bunch of times. Can they challenge for top spot, though? So last year they finished third. They were 6 points behind Sydney Uni, who finished on top. Can Manly... they're also 2 points behind Sydney Olympic in second. Can Manly challenge for top spot?
I think what will happen is it'll be a similar scenario to last season where they'll finish in that third or fourth position, and they could potentially upset one of those top one or two teams in the finals because of the experience they have. I think there are some other teams. I think Rpr, we could expect them to finish in a top one or top two. We haven't got to a team like Sydney Olympic yet, who I think will be up there personally. But I think, Manly, I think they're almost a certainty for top four. I'd be very surprised. It'd be very disappointing if they didn't make top four. And once they get into that top four, they'll be very, very dangerous comes finals time, because they've got that experience of winning the championships. They've got that core together. And against teams like Rpr, which have made a lot of new additions, a relatively new squad, that's when we could start to see that core really start to make its impact.
Interesting. It'll be fascinating to see how this one plays out. Moving on to the next team, the Northern Tigers. They had another successful or reasonably successful campaign last year. They were grand finalists in 2019. They made the finals again last year. They finished fourth. What are you expecting from them? Are they going to be able to continue their good form and make the top four again, or do you see them maybe dropping out?
Yeah, well, I think they'll definitely be in that conversation. I think they're in a similar boat to Spartans, where, they finished on the same points last season, except Tigers beat them out on goal difference to make the top four. They're in a similar spot to Spartans, where I think they'll be in that conversation, but it won't. It's not a certainty that they're going to be in there. However, that being said, like Spartans, they have made some smart moves in the off season. You talk about Isabella Gomez and Aidan Keane coming across from Institute. We spoke about them earlier. Aidan Keane, we spoke previously how she was top scorer for the Institute, a team that scored goals for fun last season. And it's good because both those players are Northern Tigers juniors, so having them back, it'll be a familiar environment. So I don't think it'll be a difficult transition for them at all. The good news is that their top scorer, Daisy Arrowsmith, is back, and she's a really phenomenal player at this level. She can score goals very, very well. Only a couple of seasons ago, she was scoring plenty of goals. Last season, she scored 8 in 12. She was the second top scorer in 2019, a couple of seasons back. They've got Hannah McNulty, Greta Kazula, Maddie Bart. All those girls are coming back as well. They played in the New South Wales representative team that took on Queensland. They've got Lauren Allen coming back. She's coming from the Jets. Unfortunately, though, now this is a big miss as well, similar to Spartans in them losing Alex Roberts. They've lost Ellie Brush to an ACL that she sustained with Sydney FC in the W League. And that's a massive out, and that's going to hurt them defensively. So I think their attack has improved. They've got Aidan Keane coming in who will improve, and her and Daisy Arrowsmith up top looks like a very, very nice partnership that they could have. Maybe shift Aidan Keane out wide potentially too. But yeah, it is going to be challenging. I think Ellie Brush is going to be a big miss for them. And I think that could potentially hurt their chances of making top four. That being said, I think definitely expect to see them right up there in that fourth, fifth kind of conversation right until the end of the season.
Another team who we think might be there or thereabouts, well, at least they were last season, the Northwest Sydney Koalas. Last year they finished 7th, 1 point outside the top four. What do you think of them? Are they similar to the Northern Tigers in a similar boat where they're going to be there or thereabouts and it's just going to be a battle?
I'm going to say no here. I think they're just under that kind of level, because of they've made some really strong ins as well, similar to Tigers. I just like that what I see from Tigers a bit more in terms of their squad. They've brought in Rachel Suter, who's won a championship with Sydney Uni. He's got that experience. We've got Claire Coelho, who's come across from the Jets, who was second in saves in this W League season that we've just had. Jamie Millard, who's got Junior Matilda's cap. She's come from Institute. Volkanovski's come from Institute. Scarlett Thomas has come from Institute. So they've made some really good signings, I think. I think having Millard and Volkanovski is going to really help their midfield. You've got Sophie Harding, the top scorer, who scored 10 and 11 last season. She's coming back. Nat Tobin's coming back from Sydney FC. Erin Pridmore's coming back. So they've got what seems to be like a really good squad. But the thing that concerns me, and this, again, small sample size, so we take this with a grain of salt, that round 1 loss to MacArthur, I think was a huge, what I thought was a disappointment. I think they were favourites going into that game. And for them, I think they could be in a similar position where they miss out on the top 4 by a couple points. Because again, and this, again, going back to what I said at the start of the podcast, goes back to the quality of this side. When you look at the ins that they've made, that this is a side that could miss out on top 4. In previous years, this might have been a side that we thought, you know what, this team's going to make top 4 more than not, more likely than not. But yeah, I think time will tell for this team. They're a team that I think are a dark horse to make the top 4. And I could be proven wrong here because of the players they have, which are very, very high quality players. And if they gel together, which I think will happen later in the season, this could be the kind of team that gets better as the season goes on, and that'll help them, given that we've got that 22-game season back this year.
Well, I mean, they'll be hoping the season gets better as it goes on. As you mentioned, that 3-0 loss in the opening round to MacArthur. MacArthur, who of course finished 10th last year, so a disappointing result. They'll be hoping to turn things around as the season goes on. Of course, 1 game, small sample size, as you said. But taking a look at the next team, this is a team who we think is going to be right up the top. At least they were last year. Sydney Olympic. They finished 2nd last year. They scored a bunch of goals. They scored the most goals in the league, scoring 33 in 11 games. Sorry, almost got a little bit too tongue-tied there, but we persevered, we soldiered on. The defence was pretty good as well, but their biggest disappointment was in the finals when they lost to Manly, despite being up 2-1. Are these going to be Sydney Uni's biggest challenges, do you think, Will?
Well, yeah, I think Olympic. There's a lot to like about this Olympic side. I mean, unfortunately, arguably their most key player, Courtney Vine, is going to be out for the first 7 to 8 weeks with an injury. So she scored 14 goals and 12 for them last season. Has had a very, very strong W League campaign. So it looks like she was set to continue right on into this season. And unfortunately, that's going to be disrupted with a long-term injury. So that is a bit unfortunate for them, and it does leave a bit of a hole that they have to fill. A 14-goal hole that has to be filled up by someone, but that's not to say that the remaining players can't make it up. They've got their whole Sydney FC group are all back, and I'll talk about why that's the case in a minute. Palaya's coming back; she'll be in the centre midfield. You've got Hawkesby from the centre of midfield; she'll be back as well. Wyman, you can expect to see her in goals. Charlotte McLean, you can see her in defence. So all those players are Sydney FC players, and that particular link comes through Ante Juric, who coaches the men's team and also coaches the Sydney FC women's team. So not particularly surprising to see a high number of Sydney FC players in the Sydney Olympic side. But not just that they have good players coming back, but they've made some really good moves. One that I want to talk about in particular is Tegan Callister. Out wide for the Wanderers. She has had a very, very impressive season. She's 4th in the W League in assists, but has actually played the least games out of anyone in the top 10. So she's had a very, very efficient season out wide, came kind of into it towards the end. So if she's out wide, and once Courtney Vine gets fit and healthy, you put Tegan Callister out wide and Courtney Vine up front, it all of a sudden starts to become a very, very dangerous equation. They've got Claudia Chilocan, who we spoke about when we spoke about Manly. She's come across as well. She's just won a championship, so she's got that experience under her belt. She's also signed for Sydney FC as an injury replacement. Nicola Orgel comes across from the Wanderers. Lexi Moreno and Hannah Burke join as well, which I think are pretty smart moves as well. So yeah, I think this is a team that finished in the top 2 last season. I'd expect them to be top 1, 2, 3 kind of team this season again. They'll be upset the way that they went out as well. To lose the semi-final the way they did, to the eventual champions, you do take some solace in that. But to not win last season, I think would have been a disappointment. And I think they'll want to come out very, very strong from the start and send some big messages in the opening games and go a long way into securing that championship.
Well, so this ties in nicely to our next team as well, because our next team on the list is Sydney University. So I'm going to ask you one more question about Olympic, and then that can sort of lead into our Sydney
Mm.
Uni preview. What does Sydney Olympic need to do to finish on top? Can you see them overtaking Sydney Uni?
I think, I think they definitely have the potential to finish on top. If I was to pick, um, if I was to pick like one or two teams that were to finish on top, I think it's probably a toss up between Rpr or Olympic, just on the strength of their squads. What Olympic has is over a squad like Rpr is, and this comes back to the preseason thing I was talking about, is the fact that they all play for Sydney FC is gonna feature massively for them, because what happens with a team like Arpia is you have all these players coming back from pre-season, and with uni as well. A similar thing happens across various clubs. They've spent that season played different systems, different players, and then within a couple of weeks they've got to get it together and play round one. Sydney Olympic don't have that problem because half their squad has just played the entire W League season together and won the premiership, mind you, and are playing in the grand final. So the togetherness isn't a worry for this team like it would be for other teams. And I think that is an advantage that they could have. And it was an advantage, I think, last season, and it's going to be amplified this year.
So what about Sydney Uni then? They have been the best team in the NPLW New South Wales in recent years. They've been pretty dominant. They lost the grand final last year, but they did finish on top. They won 9 games, drew 2, went the whole regular season undefeated. Their one loss coming on arguably the biggest stage in the grand final. Their defence was, rock solid. They conceded 3 goals over the entire season. They have got a little bit of a challenge though in the fact that they've lost their manager, I believe. Alex
Yes.
Eparkis has gone over to Perth Glory in the W League. What do you make of Sydney Uni? We've spoken about Olympic and Manly as potential challengers. Sydney Uni though are just the name that looms large over everyone else. Can they do it again, or do you see them regressing a little bit from last year?
Well, to answer the question directly, I think I do see a regression from this year. I think you look at the types of players they've lost, and it is a big list, and it is a list of, it is not just a long list, but a list of big names. Julianne Russell won't be returning. Tori Toomuth has gone across to Apia. Grace Meyer and Nikki Flannery, we've talking about them, they've gone across to Apia. Michelle Heyman won't be coming back. Tegan Callister, who I just spoke about as a one to watch for Olympic, she's left. Rachel Suter, who we spoke about with Koalas as a key player for them in terms of championship experience, she's gone. She's gone as well. So they've lost players, which are very, very important. But I think they've done a decent job in replacing them. They've picked up Rachel Lowe, Hannah Jones, Lauren Hughes, and Emma Iliowski, all of which I think are smart signings. But the ultimate question then becomes, do they replace the outs? And unfortunately, my answer to that question would be no. I don't think this team will be as strong as last year. Granted, they were very strong. So it then becomes a question, well, do they fall outside the top four? Um, that one is a tough one because I think, again, that third and fourth spot, I don't necessarily think is like a lock. They're going to be in that conversation, and this ultimately depends on how well this side adjusts without having Alex Epakis, who led them to consecutive first place finishes for 3 years in a row. So that's obviously a big loss. But the good news is that the coaches that have come in to replace him are also part of that Sydney Uni system. You have Emily Husband and Amy Shepherd coming across. Emily Husband, of course, is an assistant coach at Canberra. So they're excellent coaches. They're very, very well respected within that Sydney Uni program. And it's no surprise that John Curran, the director of football over there, made that move to bring them in. The good news for Uni as well is that they can also look to their reserve grade squad, who were, I would argue, I wouldn't argue, I would say this very, very confidently, is that reserve grade side was more dominant than their first grade side. It was a very, very strong season for them. I was fortunate enough to commentate the grand final, where they basically ran away with it since the start. You have someone like Steph Augustus in that side who scored 18 goals in 8 appearances last season,
That's
which
crazy.
was the highest. Yeah, that is just an insane rate, right? She was the highest goal scorer in any NPL senior comp, men's or women's, under 20s, first reserves. Like, you get the idea. 18 in 8 speaks for itself. So you think someone like that, you could see, or you should see her in the first grade squad, hopefully slotting in quite nicely. You've got other really good players in there as well. Pollitt, who plays out wide, is good. McHugh's short. At centre back, she's been in the program for a while. She's quite good. You've got Lani Johnson and Sarah Morgan, both central midfielders, quite good. So the good thing with Sydney Uni is, yes, they've lost a lot of players, but their reserve grade squad is very, very strong. So expect to see a lot of those girls coming through. And I think it would be good. And I think Director of Football John Curran has hinted at that when he spoke to Football New South Wales in the official preview, when he kind of mentioned, and also kind of taking a jab at other teams when he said that we're not in the business of trying to buy a first grade competition, and that he'd rather buy, or not buy, he would rather build a whole kind of club which takes time to develop the players. So to me, that signals maybe the expectations are a bit lower this year, if they want to develop some of these reserve grade girls. But yeah, I still think
could just be a little bit of posturing, just trying to take the pressure off. Considering that they didn't win it last year, they want to downplay it a little bit more, perhaps.
Yeah, potentially. I still think that that's not to say that this team has fallen off a cliff completely and will finish down in 10th, 11th, or 12th. I don't think that would happen. I think that is bordering on impossible. I think this team at the very least will be mid-table and potentially could go very high and could finish in that top 4 if it goes right for them. But again, this is a transition year for them. To go from all those years of success under one coach and that playing group, and then to have that all moved around, it is going to take time to adjust. So it will take it will take its toll on them, I think, and we could see them, and I think we will see them fall down the ladder a little bit.
Well, mate, that does bring us not quite to an end, but that does wrap up, our team by team look at the season coming up. So I do want to keep talking about the NPL New South Wales. I've got a few questions for you, so I'm going to put you on the spot, mate, with 2 questions here. So who do you think is going to finish on top, and then which team are you most excited to see this season overall?
Who do I think will finish on top? I think if I had to pick a team, I think Rpr will finish on top this season. I think there's so much about them. Yes, there are some question marks about whether they can get it together, but I honestly think they will. I think having Spencer Pryor in there is going to go a long way into getting them together. If I was to pick a team that I'm most excited to look at this season, I'm actually really excited to look at a team like Blacktown. I think they have, whilst they haven't made a lot of new signings, I think what they have is a very exciting team which, could potentially make it run at going very, very far. This could be one of those feel-good stories of the season because, comparatively to a team like Rpr or Olympic or Manly, they don't necessarily have as much W League talent. But I think you get this very, very good feeling when you look at their squad. I've already spoke about Kyra Cooney-Cross and what she brings to the table. And I think that's a big reason why I'm very, very excited to watch them, because I think what she brings in the midfield, I don't think a lot of teams have, to be honest. And when you combine her with players like, Rosie Galea, Ashley Crofts and Charlotte Grant, the team suddenly starts to look very nice, and they go out and add Courtney Nevin and Letitia McKenna. So I think, if I was to pick if I was to pick a favourite for this season, it would be Rpr. If I was to pick a team that I'm going to be keeping a special eye on, it would probably be Blacktown.
Interesting, mate. So looking at it overall, though, why do you love the NPLW so much, and how does it compare to the W League? And for people who in New South Wales who might not have been exposed to the NPL level, who might be A-League and W League fans, what would you say to them to try to get them involved and get them engaged in a more grassroots competition?
Well, yeah, I touched on this briefly in the introduction, but the great thing and the reason I love commentating the NPL women is that you have a lot of players who are playing at a very high level. You have junior Matildas, ex-Matildas, you've got even a few current Matildas, you've got W League players, you've got all those W League stars that I've mentioned over the last hour and a bit of the podcast. So, yeah, that's why I really like it. It's very, very entertaining. The standard is very, very high. And, one of the misconceptions is that there is a big drop-off from W League to NPLW, which I would just completely dispute outright. I think, we spoke about straight off the bat a team like Rpr, which we could see being dropped in straight in. And you could make, the case for Uni. And there were conversations happening about that Uni team for the last 3 years. How would that team go in the W League? So there's always teams like that. Sydney Olympic, you can make a similar case. Manly, you could do the same thing. So, the standard of football is very, very high. And the good thing is you get to see a lot of players who are on W League rosters, but don't usually get a chance. I spoke about this in particular with Aidan, Keane, and Isabel Gomez, who are going to be at Tigers. So they were with the Wanderers, but of course they're very good players at this level, but unfortunately did get a chance at W League level. So this can often be a proving ground for players to really take it to the next level. And players have gone from all heights from here. You've got someone like Princess Sabini, who is an absolute star. Kyra Cross, who I've spoken about probably more times than I need to. Remy Simpson, all stars of Australian women's football. And that's why, you should be excited for this. The good news is all the games are live, free, and exclusive on NPL TV. The broadcasting, I can assure you, is at a great standard. You have a broadcaster who cares about the product. You have commentary for all the games, and I can tell you now the commentators that are involved are very, very knowledgeable guys that have been around much, much longer than I have. And those guys are really, really great at providing really good analysis. And the games are also available on demand, so if you want to go back and watch them, you can. And chances are there's probably a team near you as well. So get down. If you're a fan of a particular W League team, and you heard some of the names that are on your team that I mentioned as players to watch, go down, go have a look at and see what they're doing, because chances are they're playing some really, really good football. It's very, very entertaining, and it's really just a great day out. There's plenty of great NPL grounds in Sydney, and it can be a really fun time.
Fantastic, mate. Couldn't have said it any better myself. Mate, I love the NPL. I love the NPLW as well. I think it's so fascinating, so exciting, so entertaining as well. I think... man, I just echo all the things you said. It's fantastic. I think one of the big things that you see, in particularly in the women's game, is that link to the professional level, that link to the W League. So, you've got players from the W League coming back to the NPLW in New South Wales as well. But then also we mentioned going through some of those lists as well, that we've seen players graduate as well. So if you go out there and you watch the NPL New South Wales, you really are getting a glimpse at the future of not only W League football, but Australian football. And you mentioned, the number of Matildas and young Matildas that'll be out there as well. It's really exciting times.
Well, to speak about one player in particular who's come through the NPL women here in New South Wales, Mary Fowler. Came through the NPL, and now she's over. She's overseas, killing it. I think she was put on Goal.com's, I think Next Gen list or something like that, where they had like the top 10 women's football youth prospects globally. So she's gone from strength to strength. All starting in this league right here, and that's not to say that there won't be more in the future. And I can almost certainly say that expect to see a lot of Matildas in the future come from this league.
Definitely, mate. Well, that does bring us pretty much to the end of our NPLW New South Wales preview. Thank you very much for joining me and giving myself and the listeners, a full preview and a lot of insight into a lot of these teams and a lot of these players as we look forward to what we anticipate is going to be a captivating, exciting, and enthralling season to be, mate. If people who want to get more of your content, mate, where can they find you? And they can also see you at a whole range of NPLW games this year, right?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to be commentating, or hopefully I'll be, I should be commentating every week, barring any game cancellations or anything like that. Unfortunately, I was scheduled to commentate Sydney Olympic versus Tigers this weekend, but that unfortunately got cancelled because half of Sydney FC plays for Sydney Olympics, so they'll be off busy in the grand final. But no, yeah, you can check me out commentating the games live on NPL TV. You can also catch me on Twitter, where I post NPLW content as well as other content as well at Konstandinidis. Or you can catch me right here on the reserve team doing various video content stuff on the live streams for them over on Twitch at twitch.tv/the reserve team. But yeah, so that's where everyone can find me. But the big message would be to tune into the games.
Fantastic, mate. Well said. Couldn't agree more. If people are interested in following me as well, I am at Branson Gibson on Twitter. Branson is spelled S-E-N. Thanks, Mum and Dad, for that one. Make sure as well to check out thereserveteam.com.au. It is your home of all things Australian and New Zealand football. We cover a wide variety of topics, everything from the A-League to the W League to the local game to kit culture. It's all there. It really is a fantastic fan forum for all things football, and we love to have people engaged across all of our platforms. You can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitch. What else are we on, Will? I think that's about it. YouTube, like and subscribe to
Yeah, I was
this.
going to say YouTube, yeah.
Make sure to check out our friends at the Ladies League as well. They do fantastic work. But don't forget, guys, head to thereserveteam.com.au, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. It does make a difference. Thank you very much for tuning in to our NPL New South Wales preview. We are looking forward to a fantastic NPLW season, Will.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I was as much as I was expecting my game to get postponed this weekend, I was still a bit disappointed. So yeah, I'm just itching to get back down there, calling the games, seeing the games, watching the games. It honestly does become quite an immersive experience.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for joining me, mate, and thank you everyone for listening.